Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Bridges. I'm superintendent here in Naperville Community School District 203. I'd like to welcome everyone here this morning and ask that we begin. If you're able to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our meeting will go ahead and come to order at this time, and I'm going to ask Ms. Dvorak if she would do a roll call of the board members in attendance from districts 200, 203, and 204.
District 200 board members present: Jim Froman, Brad Paulson, Joanne Coghill, Rosemary Swanson. District 203 board members present: Terry Fielden, Mike Yench, Susan Crotty, Donna Wampke, and Kristen Fitzgerald. 204 board members present: Lori Price, Kathy Peel, Justin Karubis, Michael Razik, and Mark Reisman.
Thank you. Just a couple other quick comments. I know Board Member Price from District 203 will be joining us at one point. And then the Board of Education President, Jackie Romberg, had a schedule conflict and was unable to change, and she's out of state. She will be listening in via phone, so she'll be aware of the conversation that's going on. I would like to take an opportunity to thank Principal Gaskin, who is in the back here, and the staff at Lincoln Junior High School for opening up your tile gym for us this morning to be able to have this important conversation. And just a kind of a quick note for everyone. We are in a school, as you know, and the school is in session today. So we may have some of those unintended or unexpected interruptions of bells or a surprise sixth grade student opening the gym door to walk in and kind of be a little shocked. But school is session, and we certainly don't want to interrupt that in what goes on. So school will continue, and we'll go ahead and have a great conversation today. For the members of our audience that are here, this is a fantastic opportunity for the three communities and the three school districts to be able to come together to have conversation about important issues related to education. Our three districts, I know as superintendents, we spend a lot of time working together, and our school district staff works together on quite a bit, and we'll actually talk about some of that in a little bit. And we share so many representatives in the General Assembly that it made great sense that we have this conversation together. And that's really what this is intended to be today, is a dialogue among elected officials on the boards of education and our elected officials who represent us in Springfield to just have a conversation and to talk about matters that are important to all of us and decisions that can be made both at the state level and locally that have an impact on our communities. So we look forward to this conversation today and do it hopefully in the spirit of working together in collaboration. So we're excited about this opportunity. For members of our audience who are here, this, as you've seen, is structured and agendaed very similar to a Board of Education meeting. Because of the board members that we have present from each of the districts, we have to post this as an open meeting, as a Board of Education meeting. So it's going to be a skeleton agenda of a board meeting, and we're going to be a little outside of normal operating procedures on a board meeting, but just some things that I would like to call to your attention is that we do have an agenda that we will follow. It will be a bit of a free-flow discussion. Even though we have invited the public, and we are operating this like a Board of Education meeting, we will not be taking questions directly from the audience, but we will allow an opportunity for public comment toward the end of the agenda. A couple other things. This meeting is being recorded by Naperville District 203. A copy of the recording will be available to the other districts, and I know we will be posting it on our website, and I'm sure the other districts as well. A couple of things about some other logistical issues. We will respect the end time. I know some of our representatives have done some great things to adjust their schedules and change some things in order for them to be here, but I do know that some of them have commitments really back-to-back with this, and we have to be respectful of that time. And some of them may need to leave even before the 9 o'clock end time. So in advance, I'd like to thank all of them for making time to be here this morning and share what time you can give us, and certainly understand and respect that you have a lot of great work to do and that you may need to leave. There's that first bell. And typically, just another thing about logistics, what we're going to ask you to do, because we are in session, and this is for members of the community as well, if you do leave, we're going to ask that you exit out the doors in the back corner there. That's going to take you directly outside. Rather than rerouting you back through the school where our students are in attendance, that door will lead you to the parking lot. If you exit the door and turn right, that's going to lead you toward the front of the building. So we'll respectfully ask that if you do leave, and when you do leave at the end of the meeting, we'll all exit out of that door. My role today as the host superintendent will really be to just kind of facilitate and keep the conversation moving along. So I thank my colleagues Jeff and Karen for giving me that opportunity. And as this becomes maybe a future endeavor and we go to other districts, we'll hope that they host as well. But at this time, we do want to have some welcome and introductory comments by representatives of each of our Board of Education. And so I'd ask the president from Indian Prairie District 204, Lori Price, to offer just a few words of welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Again, thank you for those who have attended, our representatives and our senators here. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I think this will be a very informative meeting and hopefully some good discussion and will come out of this. One thing I try to ask my kids every night after school is, what one thing did you learn today that you didn't know before you went to school? So it's my hope and wish that at this meeting, we all take away something that we learned that we didn't know before we got here. So thank you again for coming.
And Vice President from District 203, Terry Fielden.
So on behalf of 203, I want to welcome everybody here, and I sincerely appreciate your time that you've taken out of your busy schedules. I know it's an election year, and you've got other commitments as well, too. This is certainly an important issue to all the districts that we meet with our legislators to go through ideas and problems that we have. But I also like hopefully this will set some groundwork that we could do this on a more regular basis as we go forward. I think that the legislators would benefit from getting a deeper understanding of what school boards face, more on a personal level than just via telephone or via email, so that you can really understand some of the struggles that our local districts have, but also in the other state. But sincerely appreciate your time and look forward to a productive discussion.
Great, and thank you. The Vice President from School District 200, Jim Vroman.
Yes, I would like to echo the appreciation expressed by both Lori and Terry for our representatives to be here to take the time to listen to our concerns and the worries that we have as we meet the challenges that we all face in our respective districts. In District 200 last year, we had a major community engagement process session, followed much what District 203 did 2 years ago. And our residents told us that they really appreciated what we were doing in our district. Our teachers were fantastic, our programs were good, but they realized that we didn't have enough revenue coming in in the future to meet the needs of our kids and wanted us to address revenue issues. And the recommendations we received outlined those issues. And then SB 16 was passed by the General Assembly Senate. And so that raises the challenges we all face. And so we'd like to have a discussion and conversation about the challenges we all face. And thank you for being here to listen to us.
Thank you for those welcoming comments. And at this time, I'd like to invite our legislators to provide an introduction by just indicating who you are in the area that you represent. And we'll begin on my right with Representative Kifowit.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Kifowit. I was elected roughly 2 years ago. I am the 84th district, which encompasses Aurora, Oswego, a bit of Naperville, and Montgomery.
State Senator Michael Connolly. My district begins on the north in Carroll Stream and goes south to 111th Street, basically Route 59 on the west and about Naper Boulevard on the east. My wife and I are 203 parents. We're proud to be 203.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Natalie Manley. I represent the 98th District, which includes parts of Joliet, Crest Hill, Romeoville, Plainfield, and Bolingbrook. And thank you for having us here today.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Ron Sandak. I'm the state representative for the 81st District, which comprises portions of Downers Grove, Darien, Lisle, Woodridge, Westmont, Bolingbrook, and Naperville. Wonderful communities all, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Senator Jennifer Bertino-Tarrant. I'm the 49th District, which represents Shorewood, Plainfield, and sections of Bolingbrook, Romeoville, Crest Hill, and West Joliet.
Good morning. I'm State Representative Darlene Singer. I represent Naperville and a little piece of Warrenville.
Linda Chapalavia, Aurora, and North Aurora.
Jeannie Ives, I represent Wheaton, Carroll Stream, West Chicago, parts of Warrenville, Naperville, Lisle, all of Winfield, and I'm a proud Wheaton-Warrenville South football mom.
Good morning. I'm State Senator Linda Holmes. I represent Aurora, some of Naperville, some Montgomery, a little bit of Oswego, and some North Aurora. And I have District 204 within my district.
Great. Thank you. And then maybe if we could get on the end and ask our Board of Education members to just introduce yourself by name and district that you serve, so members in our audience who can't see your signs know who's here.
Joanne Coghill, District 200.
Kristen Fitzgerald, District 203.
Mark Rising, District 204.
Mike Yench, District 203.
Rosemary Swanson, District 200.
Michael Razak, District 204.
Susan Crotty, District 203.
Jeff Schuler, Superintendent from District 200.
Again, Dan Bridges, District 203.
Karen Sullivan, Indian Prairie 204.
Terry Fielden, District 203.
Lori Price, District 204.
Jim Vroman, District 200.
Kathy Peel, District 204.
Brad Paulson, District 200.
Donna Wanke, District 203.
Justin Krubis, 204.
Great. Now introductions are aside, we'll move into some discussion items. And as the superintendents met to plan and discuss this agenda, we thought it might be beneficial for all of the representatives in attendance, as well as board members from other districts, to hear just a little bit about each of the districts. By providing just a brief status update. And our talking points really will come from a one-page sheet that was next to your agenda as you came to the table. I believe these were available for members of the public as you came in as well. And I'll go ahead and begin just as a brief overview of Naperville Community Unit School District 203. We serve the communities of Naperville, Lisle, Woodridge, and Bolingbrook, and we do that at 22 different sites. That includes the 1 early childhood center, 14 elementary schools, 5 junior high schools, as well as 2 high schools. Our first day of attendance enrollment this year was just under 17,000 students, and you can see how that demographically breaks down according to categories identified on the Illinois State Report Card. What I will call your attention to as purpose of speaking a little bit about our district, as you look, for example, at the percentage of Caucasian students, in 2000, that number was 83.9%. Today, we're about 65% Caucasian white students, and you can see we've had increases in our student demographic in the categories of Black, Hispanic, Asian, and also multiracial and ethnic. Another indicator about our school district I'd like to call to your attention is the percent of low-income students. In the year 2000, 1.2% of our students in District 203 were identified as low income as defined by free and reduced lunch standards. Today, that number sits at 16.3. So we've seen a significant shift in change in the demographics of the student population here in District 203. Our per pupil operating cost, you'll see, is there, and we're actually very proud of that number. As we look at comparison large unit districts and other suburban districts, we find ourselves really right in the middle. We like to talk about the fact that we get a pretty good bang for the buck in District 203 here at a typical for this area operating cost with a 25.1 average ACT score. So we feel very good about that. There are just under 35,000 households here. And then we'll talk, I know, a little bit about legislation a little bit. So that's a brief overview of District 203, and I'll turn it over to Karen to talk a little bit about 204.
Okay, thank you, Dan. 204 serves the communities of Naperville, Aurora, Bolingbrook, and Plainfield. I'll kind of break that down a little bit more, though. We're about, I want to say 60% of our students come from Naperville, about 34% come from Aurora, a little bit of slice of Bolingbrook, 5%, and a little even tinier slice of Plainfield. So majority of our kids come from Naperville and Aurora. We're one of the largest districts in the state, 3rd or 4th, depending upon the day that you look at. Our current enrollment is around 28,500. Little fun fact, because of our size, more students from the city of Naperville come to Indian Prairie schools than they do come to Naperville 203. So maybe that's one of those things you learned today that you might not have known before, right? We have 33 sites across 46 square miles, covering 55,000 households, so we're large. One of the interesting things, I think, that if you look across all of our districts, when you look at the demographics, it may also be something that you might not expect when you think of Indian Prairie or Wheaton or Naperville, and that's the diversity. We're significantly diverse. We anticipate, if you look at, referencing what Dan talked about, if you look at our percentage, we expect to be a majority minority district either next year or the year after when we look at our trend data. So I also think that's something that people don't think about when they think about schools in this area. Same thing in terms of looking at our percent of low income and our percent of English language learners. We're a district with over 100 different languages spoken in our schools. So that, again, reflects the diversity that we see in our schools. We have been significantly impacted because of cuts in state funding over the last 5 years. We've been significantly impacted and have cut over $40 million in the last 5 years and are currently at an per pupil operating cost of $10,636. So we are well below the state average, and we are the lowest in DuPage County in terms of that. We're proud of the efficiency of our school district while maintaining, very high achievement, and we have a very strong interest in keeping it that way. So we'll be talking about that again later. So I think I get to turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you, and again, welcome. I probably have the pleasure at this meeting of saying that I think of probably the elected representatives that are here and staff, I'm probably the newest. I think this is my 18th day in District 200. And no, I'm not. I'm still counting the days, which tells you how new. But District 200, we proudly educate students at 20 sites across our district. We educate students from Wheaton-Warrenville, Carroll Stream, Winfield, West Chicago. We've listed, I think, a number of the same statistics on the chart, and I guess just two that I'll point out in particular. 1 in 4 students in District 200 do qualify now as low income. We've had significant increases in the need to provide additional service in school breakfast programs and some of the opportunities that we have to provide for our students that are wonderful opportunities, important opportunities, but resource-dependent opportunities. Certainly, we've also seen in District 200 a significant shift in the number of students coming to us as second language students, and again, that's been a tremendous opportunity for our district, an opportunity that we're very proud to really educate our students, but again, one that certainly has been heavily resource dependent for us. A couple of other things just to point out, not necessarily in my experience in 200, but 200 also, like the other 2 districts that are here today, has had to make some very, very difficult operations, difficult cuts in terms of how we're operating within the district. And just yesterday, I had an opportunity to visit a school with probably our most senior principal in the district, who spent a lot of time showing me all of the things that she's very proud of, but did say there's really not much left to cut within the district. We really only have 2 levers left, and that's to significantly increase class size or to significantly reduce the programs that we have that are serving our special populations. And that was something that certainly really hit home to me in seeing the district. So again, welcome. That's a little bit about District 200. You can certainly read a little bit more about us in the chart, but happy to be here.
In order to just kind of begin the conversation this morning, the 3 superintendents, when we met, tried to think of a few things that we could identify, certainly as mutual interests that we have, that we thought you should hear from us about our positions on these topics, especially as you head down to Springfield and do the great work that you do on behalf of the communities that you represent. And so I'd ask you to look on the back side of that chart, and you'll see some notes about that. But each of us are going to speak briefly to them, but again, the information we've provided you, I think, makes our positions pretty clear. One of the conversations that we have heard and you have seen nationally regarding standards in states has been the discussion about the Common Core state standards. And many states are having those conversations about the implementation of those standards in their states and what it means for their states. Each of our 3 districts shares the belief that the Common Core state standards are rigorous, they're very clear, and they're uniform, and they have very clear progressions. Throughout, from kindergarten through the graduation. The learning progressions themselves are very clear and give good direction to our schools about the types of standards and where students should be. We maintain certainly the local decisions and control about the curriculum that we write and that we put in place in our classrooms aligned to these standards. But our 3 districts have been working very hard and very diligently, and in some cases working together to ensure that curriculum in our classrooms is aligned to these standards because we do believe in these standards. We think the alignment is much better than the standards that Illinois has had previously, and they are currently the Illinois standards. So as we're going to be held accountable to those standards, our curriculum is going to really reflect those standards. So we'd ask that as conversation, certainly if conversation in Illinois begins to move toward the standards, we'd ask that you certainly consider the district's position and ask and reach out to us on any input that we could give you regarding the Common Core standards. And certainly related to that is the assessment for the standards, and Karen's going to speak briefly about that.
Okay, I'm going to talk about PARC. And we've been talking about PARC and getting ready for PARC for so long, I have to look down and see what PARC stands for, because we just call it PARC, Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. And it's a group of 19 states. Illinois is one of the 19 states, obviously, that has bought into PARC versus the other assessment that's being done nationally. And it's the new assessment that's aligned to the Common Core standards. And it's computer-based. Our students in District 204 will be taking those all computer-based. I don't know, are both of you guys doing all computer or a mix?
No,
okay. They're allowing paper pencil for a while, but I think that the goal is that it will be online so that we get those results quickly. So all of our students will be taking it online, and it will be the first time that our students have been taking something like that online. So the idea behind PARC was that it would be better, not just aligned to Common Core standards, but better than our current assessments, which were pretty much the multiple choice, fill in the bubble. These were supposed to be more interactive, more engaging, really looking at more critical thinking, problem solving, having our students really doing some of the things that the Common Core standards require of them. Students will be tested more frequently than what we're used to with the ISAT and the PSAE, meaning that they'll be tested in March. With what's a performance-based kind of assessment, and then again in May for an end-of-year kind of assessment, and those combined scores would be the final score. So there's a little bit more to it in that respect. PARC is being implemented this year. It was field tested last year. Our district did participate in the field testing. I don't know if, did you? 203 did as well. We appreciated having that opportunity because it really helped us prepare. And we have been preparing. We've been preparing by getting the infrastructure ready to be able to do online assessments, having the hardware available for our students to be able to do online assessments, and obviously through the curriculum work that Dan talked about with Common Core. Because the test is new, and we'll be taking it for the first time this year, it'll be a baseline year for us. It'll be a baseline year for the state. We won't be able to compare these results with ISAT and PSAE. That's really difficult for our parents and our public to understand. And I know I'm certainly not old enough, maybe these guys are, to remember when we went from IGAP to ISAT a long time ago. It is very difficult for folks to understand. It's a totally different test than our current one. So. It also sets a baseline for accountability. So I think that's what I want our legislators to hear, what we're interested in having them hear, is that it's an unknown for us. And in some cases, that makes us a little nervous about being held accountable for an unknown test that we have no baseline for. Does that make sense? And I think that's something I wanted to share in PARC, unless there's anything you guys want to add. And then I think I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk about our expanding learning opportunities.
Yeah, so another really exciting opportunity for the three districts to come together in kind of a shared service model is the Expanded Learning Opportunities ELO program. This year in the 14-15 school year, we've got over 200 students. We've got 200 students between the three districts that are now given an opportunity to take a course in a little different format. Really the mission or the goal of ELO was to expand our blended and online opportunities for students, but to do it, I think, really through a model of less work, smarter, not harder, by pooling our resources together to share those opportunities for students and for our staff, candidly, as they participate in that experience. So that's been a new endeavor. I know came together very quickly with a lot of hard work from the three districts together, and certainly we really look forward to how that opportunity can expand and enhance other curricular opportunities for students from our three districts to learn in a little different way when it makes sense for them.
So I guess at this time, before we move into legislative issues or actions in Springfield, any questions or comments from our panel of representatives regarding the updates and information you've heard about our districts that you'd either like to comment on or a question that you might like to ask? Well, all right, why don't we move right into some of the fun topics then, right? On your sheet, some of the legislative issues that we've, well, I guess let me pause for a second, though, and ask if any of our Board of Education members have any comments or questions that you'd also like to offer.
We were crystal clear.
All right, that's good. So on your sheet, back on the table side, we do have some information about how we understand the potential impact of Senate Bill 16 would be on each of our districts if it were to be passed into law in its current form. And you can see that we've identified the percentage loss of expected loss of state revenue and what that equals in an actual amount of dollars. It doesn't automatically mean it would be teachers. We'd certainly have to look at programs and services, but to just kind of put it in an equation to help really understand what that really means, we've given an equivalent to what that dollar amount would mean to our districts. You can also see where we see ourselves as districts impacted by this bill across the state. The third, excluding Chicago, the third, the fifth and the sixth largest reductions in the state of Illinois, and then in DuPage County, the top three most impacted by this legislation. So we certainly, I know many of you have heard from constituents about the potential of this bill and what it may do, and I guess part of what we need to talk about also with that and another piece of legislation that we're concerned about, we'd like to invite you to comment on Senate Bill 16, but also Senate Bill 1, and where Senate Bill 1 stands right now, and the belief that many of us hold that if Senate Bill 1 is found unconstitutional and thrown out, that we would expect, we should expect the cost shift of the pension, the TRS pension, coming onto the local districts. So if maybe you can talk a little bit about both of those, and if there's any others that you think we need to be aware of and that we need to be thinking about so that we can help provide you with information and input to help guide you in your leadership down in Springfield. And so with that, I'll ask if there's a legislator that would like to speak to any of those first. Senator Holmes.
First of all, I just want to start out, we might as well address Senate Bill 16, and then we can move on to pensions, which is actually an area I know quite a bit about. I was on the Pension Conference Committee. I was the one dissenting vote with what came out of the Pension Conference Committee, which looks likely to prove unconstitutional, as I always suspected, and we will be back at the drawing board on that as soon as we go back to Springfield. I don't anticipate anything coming out of that until, number one, we need to get the court ruling. Then we need to, again, sit down with all the people that are impacted and see what we can work out, and we should get some guidance from the justices on what is actually constitutional and what isn't. So we will progress from there. I'm going to stay with the stance I had throughout the entire thing, was that I am not supporting any legislation on, quote, pension reform. It's really a budget problem, but I'm not going to support any of that unless the parties that are affected are in agreement. And I think we can work out an agreement, and quite frankly, Senate Bill 2404 did that, although there's parts of that that I have a feeling would have also proved unconstitutional. So that's going to be a work in progress. There is sort of no need to get worried about that until we start working on some details and know some of what's coming out. Hopefully I will be back in the negotiation process as that continues. With Senate Bill 16, which I did vote yes on, only because I wanted the discussion on school funding and the inequities to really happen. As many of you know, most of us have always felt that the reliance on property taxes is not the way to fund education, and it certainly results in a huge inequity throughout the entire state. So I did support this bill because I was assured by both the sponsor of the bill in the Senate, Senator Andy Minar, and the sponsor in the House, Representative Chapalavia, that this bill would not be called as is. It can't be. There's way too many problems. I'm not even sure it would pass the House, but she never had any intention of calling it. Her intention was, and she can speak to this, on having hearings and talking with the people who would be impacted. So for that reason, I voted yes, because I want to keep the discussion going. By it passing in the Senate, it means nothing if it passes in the House with changes, because it has to come back to the Senate. And there's no way it's going to pass in the House without major changes. So I know that particularly District 204, from the amount of letters I've received, are very upset about this, and it is not something that is going to happen. So I'm pleased that they're having the discussions, because I think it's important to talk about our children and their education and the way we fund education. But on the other hand, I don't want to cause all the anxiety and angst that these parents must be going through, thinking Senate Bill 16 as written could possibly go anywhere. So that's the address I will give on Senate Bill 16, and you can hear from people who have more opinions. Again, with the cost shift, I understand that's a concern, and the cost shift is something we have talked about for 3-4 years. That's been on the table. The reason it never goes any further than the little bit you hear coming out is because I don't think, particularly when you look at your suburban legislators, that cost shift really has that much of a prayer. I mean, it's not something I support. It's not something I think any of our suburban districts really do support. So I will leave this up to other legislators to address also.
Senator Connolly.
Thank you, Dan. And I have great respect for my colleague, Senator Holmes, but we vote on task forces every year, and that's voting for a discussion. Senate Bill 16 was voting to fundamentally change the funding formula for education. And I don't know what I did to Andy Minar, but I represent 204, 203, and 200, the number 1, 2, and 3 largest reductions in funding under Senate Bill 16. But it's important, and I'll be very brief because there are a number of elected officials who want to speak. But it's important to know the genesis of Senate Bill 16. The Senate Republican staff, our budget people, have been looking at education funding for years. They wanted to look behind the line item, and so they did. And they came up with a report showing that CPS, the Chicago Public Schools, takes in almost $1 billion more than they should under the funding formula. So we brought this to the attention of the General Assembly. Unfortunately, instead of the result being a big stop sign and saying stop what you're doing and go by the formula, Senate Bill 16 is codifying the mismanagement of education funds. I voted no. I will vote no. I sadly concur that the bill probably won't be called as Senate Bill 16. It'll likely be amended. The House does that a lot. I was once in the House. It's a different place. Representative Sandak, who once was in the Senate. But be very cautious of not just the veto session, but January 1st through the swearing in of the next General Assembly is lame duck session. and you need a simple, bare majority to pass bills. So I think you need to be very cautious, not just of November, but be very cautious of January. On Senate Bill 1, I'm an attorney. I was the law clerk for an appellate court judge for 3 years. So it's very difficult, and I think it's very, you need to be very, very careful predicting what a Supreme Court or an appellate court is going to do. That said, the recent opinion in the, I think it's the Weems case, the Supreme Court has made some very strong statements. So I voted yes to Senate Bill 1. I voted yes to all of the pension reform bills, including the one negotiated with the teachers union. But I make no predictions, but I know that there are going to be very difficult choices on education, not just for us, but certainly those of you who are elected and you're at the ground level. And it's going to be rough sailing ahead. But I echo what Terry said. I think we need to have more of these meetings. And again, I thank you for putting this together.
Any other representatives?
Yeah, I guess I should. Hi, everybody. Let me start off. The interesting thing about the process is when we're not communicated to or someone sits down with us. And when we do sit down with an elected member or from a school board or a superintendent, I think going forward we're going to need more than just the superintendent, because a month ago we met with Representative Kifowit, with one of the superintendents at the table, and Senator Holmes, and stated that this would not be going further in the format it's in, as Senate Bill 16. And now what I have is my colleagues going to the door being yelled at by constituents saying, you're going to run this bill, after we made it very clear to the superintendent we're not going to run this bill in the format it is. So what I'd like from this discussion and my notes, and it's all on tape and it's on video, that a retraction comes back from the finding that there's this mad rush to get a Senate Bill 16 passed this year or in lame duck is not fair to those colleagues after it was discussed. Now, it's important that you understand, not only if I'm the chair of elementary and secretary ed, I used to be the appropriation chair, but I stand by my word when I say something. I think we were very clear in that meeting that this bill would not go further. I've spoken with my leadership, the Speaker Madigan, and I've told him that this bill doesn't do a lot of great things for districts outside in the collar counties, and a lot of my colleagues have issues with it. In the format it's in, it would not be a good thing to put up on the board at all, and I want to work on this. November, we'll have hearings during veto session asking people like y'all to come down and speak to the issue. But what I'd like to see in the state of Illinois is more hand-holding than finger-pointing. Because our kids now, and I'm assuming all of our kids in all the districts know how to read, there's a lot of newspaper articles out there on losers and winners. I don't want my children in the state to feel like they're taken away or given something that they haven't earned or deserve. We have an equity problem, but we also have a funding problem, because 89% of an appropriated amount for education is not enough, okay? When we as adults can come to the table and say our education is more important than cutting and trimming numbers and going back in our district and saying, here, I cut the budget. You have a plethora of kids going into our juvenile justice department, causing the system to pay more money on that end than educating our kids in the state of Illinois. We pay $84,000 to $111,000 to incarcerate one child in juvenile justice department. And while I'm explaining that to this population today, you need to understand those are your children too, and those are my children, because I represent 862 school districts. I don't just represent East and West Aurora. Okay, so on face value, you'd think Representative Chapelivia must be so happy with this. She takes away money from districts and puts it into her districts. That's not true, okay? And I find fault on the other side of the coin when I have, District 131 sending out mailers to their constituents saying, call Representative Chapelivia, tell her we have to pass this because it means more money. okay? It doesn't mean more money if I can't fund you at 100%, everybody. And we haven't funded you at 100% for education in at least 5 years. So we have a funding mechanism problem with making, or a fundamental problem with, first of all, appropriating less than 100% for education for every child in the state of Illinois. Let's do that first, and then find out at what level should we really be at, right? How much should we really be spending on education per kids, even if we take it at an a la carte kind of situation? How much is okay, and will we revisit this every 3 years like a business does to make sure where are the shortcomings, where should we be focusing on? But I don't want to take money from successful districts that you guys could be in peril to be producing less than what you're producing. That's not what we want to do here in the state. And believe me, I have colleagues on both sides that will argue with me that I should or shouldn't. And I'm trying to be the person in the middle saying, can we be grown-ups for a minute? Can we show our kids that bullying's not the way to get things done? It's by sitting at the table and saying, let's sit here and talk. Because people can throw up flags and say, oh, you better watch out, we're going down a lame duck, or you could say this or the other. If you're not talking to the people that are at the table, then we're not talking, right? We're just shouting, and we're throwing accusations of people doing stuff that they're not supposed to do. Okay? So I want to see a bill that's going to work with everybody. You're not going to get 100% of what you want, but I would hope that you at least get 80% of a negotiated deal of what we're going to do in the state of Illinois and what's it'll look like. It's taken us over 20 years to get where we're at in education funding, and we don't even do that right? So, and at the federal level, where we're supposed to be getting 40% of special ed, we only get something about 16. And if you look at the Articles of Constitution in the state of Illinois under education, it says free and equitable. It doesn't say, I've got to charge you more. So now my districts are going out there, there's certain fees and stuff to offset the costs. I understand. And I know half of my districts are deficit spending, and some are borrowing money to deficit spend, and they're getting acknowledged by ISB saying, you're doing a great job. Well, that doesn't work. And I know these 3 districts, and I know you guys have tightened your belts. I understand that. I'm a businesswoman. I've looked at what you guys have been able to accomplish since we started saying we were going to consolidate back when Pat Quinn said, we're going to consolidate, and all the districts look the same. And I'm sorry. This is one of my, well, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. I'm not apologetic for how passionate I am about education in the state of Illinois, but I'm for every child. I don't care where they live. Giving the opportunity to make sure that they are successful in whatever they do, because our job in education is to make sure they're successful in the workforce, whatever that means, right? So on tape, on record, on photo, whatever you want to do, I'm not, it's my bill, okay? Could it be taken away from me? Yeah, it could be taken away from me. And then you go back to the gentleman over there at the end saying, but it's my bill, and I'd have to say it's okay to be taken away from me. And once again, I've spoken to my leadership. We have been meeting as Democratic leaderships to understand the bill on this situation, what we received from the Senate. Half the people are okay with it, half the people aren't. Leadership is not okay with this, okay? It doesn't do what it needs to do. It just takes the water in the balloon and shoves it somewhere else. It doesn't fill up the balloon for everybody. So, any questions?
Thank you. I know we have other representatives ready to speak. Representative Sandek.
Good morning, everyone. Bills don't happen, and things don't happen in a vacuum in Springfield. Bills aren't practiced. They're not dress rehearsal. Things that get through one chamber are not for discussion purposes only. That's legislation. And while it is undoubtedly true that legislation changes, and I think we just heard from the House sponsor that SB 16 will change. I think it's changing as we speak, however. And here's the process problem that I have that everyone needs to be cognizant of. Throughout the summer, Senator Menard, who is a good person, a smart, thoughtful legislator of the top order, he is unquestionably a good-hearted, thoughtful person doing what he's doing for the right reasons. But he passed a bill out of the Senate not for discussion purposes only and not for practice. It was intended to change the state aid formula to education. And the sheet in front of you sets forth what it does to the 3 districts here as affected. It affects other suburban districts as well. Throughout the summer, Senator Menard, in an open, transparent, and totally accountable way, has been meeting taking his bill on the road to any district, any legislator that will listen to him, because he's a good-hearted soul who believes in the propriety of the measure that passed the Senate. There are some invited to those meetings and some that aren't invited to those meetings. I can tell you I have not been invited to those meetings that Senator Menard is having. He does not need my vote in the House. He knows what, and so does the folks that are pushing this bill, knows what my constituents think of this bill. They're not getting my vote. So they're not going to come talk to me, and I've got nothing to trade with them anyway. And there is horse trading conversations taking place. Let's not lose our sense of reality. Speaking of process in Springfield, deals are being made or offered, and they're not to this room's benefit at all. Taking from school districts that are struggling and giving it to worse struggling school districts, more difficult, challenging financial straits, is not the way to address education, as I think Representative Chapelavia just said. I concur. And if we're going to have a real discussion about education funding, it cannot happen after a bill is passed one chamber of the General Assembly. That's not process. That's threatening. What's more, there are many who believe, again, just putting things in context and not suspending our disbelief of what goes on in Springfield, that this is a precursor for the cost shift. We heard folks talk about SB 1. I voted for it. I thought it was the right, responsible thing to do for pensioners particularly, to save the system. The court will make a decision in due course. Some believe we'll have an instructive path from the court, but I would suggest the most recent opinion in Weems provides absolutely no instruction, no help at all. I read that opinion 6 times. It's disconcerting to me, but it is what it is. So if the court tells us no, go back to the drawing board. They'll either have some instructions how to move forward or not. We're going to have to figure that out. But this discussion about education funding, again, is not happening in a vacuum. And there are some that conclude that it is part and parcel of an overall bill that will include the cost shift, which will hurt these school districts here all the more. I put up a House resolution, 1276, that some of my colleagues have signed on to. Some have not yet. I'm going to politely pressure them to do so. There is no other way that I can think of to be transparent and accountable to voters than to say which side of the fence you're on as to this bill as it currently exists. And then if we get past this session and 16 isn't called, then we can have a full, fair, comprehensive discussion about education funding in the context it deserves to be placed in, which is what outside the pressure of an existing bill that can be used inappropriately for horse trading, deal making, and otherwise. Because let's face it, we're not going to be on the winning end of any such deal. Thanks for your time.
Representative Bertino-Tarrant.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is on. Can everyone hear me? Very good. I don't like microphones. I'm a teacher by nature, and I always tell this to people because second to Representative Chapelavia, my passion is education. I would probably say I'm a tweak higher, that I just have a more calmer disposition. This is a very important bill, and I appreciate Representative Sandak saying that this was not done in a vacuum. Senator Menard has been throughout the state talking to individuals, talking to superintendents, talking to the public, with anyone who wants to listen regarding this important initiative. And I'm coming here too a little bit on the defense because like my colleague, all of a sudden I received a lot of phone calls. And to me, it was a little bit of disinformation, a little bit disingenuous because some of the concerns were not quite adequate. I know we are a very diverse state. We're looking at areas like Naperville here as opposed to down south. And my decision to vote for Senate Bill 16, and I'm going to tell you this right now, I have 2 children, 7th and 5th grade, who are in public schools. My school district is losing 64%. So this was a very serious vote for me. And for me to support it, was very shocking to people. I can assure you I talked to my superintendent. I explained my vote before I even did it. But let me just tell you kind of the genesis of how it happened. My office, if you go into my office, it's filled with my students' my kids' artwork, things they did in school. I was sitting there talking to Andy Manar, same thing. We have both young kids in schools. And when I was looking at it, he was telling how they did in school too. And we just talking about art classes and how it's fortunate for many kids to have it. My children get art twice a week. Not the best, but pretty sufficient. His kids get art once a week, every other year. And it was just kind of this aha moment. My kids, his kids, just based on where we live, that they are getting completely different opportunities. And when I hear someone call and say they should move because that's their fault, the message is wrong here. This is about our kids and our students. And I understand, when I spoke for Senate Bill 16, this is the comparison we're looking at. We're looking at safe passageways in Chicago. We're looking at schools that don't have heat. We're looking at kids fighting over iPads. And this is our reality here in Illinois. And it's a hard reality. And yes, I represent the 49th District, and I represent probably about 3 or 4 blocks here in Naperville. And I don't want to see any student not have their full opportunity. But this is a very serious situation, and I hear businesses all the time say our kids aren't prepared for the world or to work. Well, you know what? We have to create an equitable system so every student has that opportunity. I do want to also quickly address some little bit of detail in that bill. When we talk about education funding or education in the budgeting, it is a convoluted system. And I spoke to one of the business managers, and I said, I have a doctorate, and my concentration is in finance, and it is still a difficult thing for me to understand. But we have a foundation level, and then we have other opportunities to add more money. We have the poverty grant, which we've heard our colleagues say that right now 50% of that goes to Chicago automatically. The block grant's gone in this bill. That's what I've heard that for a year. They get 50%, the poverty grant, get rid of the block grant. It's gone in this bill. That's a good thing. We talk about PTEL, and while PTEL is not removed from this bill, that's a significant cost increase. Our foundation, every money that we have added over the years to education has gone not to the kids, has gone to PTEL, and it's gone to the poverty grant. So whereas every additional money, it's just floating around up there. It's not going back to the kids. And while this doesn't address PTEL, that's a very important issue, because what that does is in some areas, there are very wealthy districts who don't raise their tax rates, and they're getting a tax break. I'm not saying it's this district. I'm not saying that I'm not saying this district at all. There's also, we talk about the cost shift. And we talk about the fairness. Down south, we don't want to pay for down south needs. We don't want to pay for Chicago's needs. Chicago pays for their own pensions, in addition to the dollars that pay for all of our pensions, any teachers. So we have to remember, too, they said this will now take into account their pensions. We will now be paying their pensions. We will not. Senate Bill 16 does not cover Chicago pension costs. So we are not all of a sudden taking that over. Again, about we don't want to pay for down south, we don't want to pay up here. We talk about the cost shift. I'm going to tell you right now, those people down south are probably going to say, yeah, take the cost shift. These superintendents are making $80,000, $60,000. 33% of every $100,000 goes to pay for pension costs. So again, we're trying to mix things here. We're trying to create a balance. And I'm not going to say I voted for Senate Bill 16 because, it was just a discussion. But what I was assured that we would come back and talk about regional issues, because obviously there's different costs of living. So we would talk about regional issues, and we talk about adequacy. And I can assure you, and I think Representative Chapelivia just said it too, we need to talk about 100% funding for education. So it was a tough choice, but I believe in my choice, and I'm not here apologizing for it. I think we need to focus on education funding for all our students.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Ives?
Thank you. There's a few things that we need to set the record straight here. First of all, a task force is when you have the education discussion. And what happened is there was a task force, and Speaker Madigan he refused to assign any members to that task force from the House, so Republicans could not, in the House side, could not put any members on that task force. That's what happened. Coming out of that funding task force was Senate Bill 16. Senate Bill 16 then passes the Senate, and Mr. Madigan does not call it in the House, which was a good thing. He knew that it was dead on arrival, but that task force was the opportunity for members of the House to go in there and have a voice. We were not offered that opportunity. I sit on the Education Appropriations Committee for K through 12 education. This is something that I am very passionate about, is our education funding. And here's what happened this summer then, as reported by Cranes. Democrat leaders met behind closed doors with special interest groups to decide what to do with SB 16. That's exactly how Cranes reported it, and it's true. And those Democrat leaders that they identified were not people that I actually sit on the Appropriations Committee with, other Democrats that represent suburban districts, like Carol Sente, like Michelle Mussman. They're also Democrats that were not identified as being part of those discussions. And I find it pretty egregious when the taxpayers that I represent, the schools that I represent, do not have a voice at a table when major discussions are going about Senate fund or about education funding. And so the process is very maligned. We're not represented at the table. This is not a fair and open process, and you don't pass legislation simply to have a further discussion. Legislation can become anything at that point. It's in the process of becoming a law. So all of that I find very offensive. I'm offended. I'm part of that education committee, never included in any of these discussions. Apparently my taxpayers don't matter, but you do. One other thing that we need to address, and that is the foundation funding level. Because if the foundation funding level is so important, and I agree that it is, and right now it's set at $6,119, the first thing SB 16 does is take that foundation level down to $5,154 per pupil. That's nearly a $1,000 decrease as a foundation level of funding, and then you start to apply the formula. So if that's such a hot-button issue, that should be something that we talk about extensively. And so you can't just wave off that, well, we've never funded the foundation level. Then why does this bill immediately take it down $1,000 per pupil? The next thing we should talk about is Chicago pensions, because in the last budget bills that passed at the end of the session, $50 million were just flat out given to Chicago to shore up their pensions. $10 million extra in transportation costs for safe passage. $35 million as a special entity to go to a school building grant without going through the normal school building grant process, just given to Chicago. Chicago, in this Senate Bill 16 as it is currently written, loses about $38 million. Well, we just gave it back to them on the backside in other budget bills. So this is not a fair process. It's not open process. And I'll tell you what, my taxpayers are fired up. We feel under attack, because guess what's under attack? Our property is under attack. You fail to pay your property taxes, you lose your property. You are coming after our personal property with SB 16, and we know it, and we don't like it, and we're not going to take it. And that's why I'm hosting a town hall. Everybody's invited. October 9th. We are still determining the place, but I will definitely let you know. And the superintendent of schools, Chris Koch, will be there. And you will be able to voice your opinions and let him feel the heat, and he can take that back to Springfield. And you should all be there to let them know that we're not going to take it. When this bill says that Aurora District 131, who has a college-ready rate of 19%, 19%, even if you were to graduate from Aurora 131, your college-ready rate is only 19%. This bill says that you will now receive state spending per pupil of $6,967. District 200, under this bill, the state spending per pupil is $166. Talk about a disparity in state funding. That is huge, enormous. And here's how we feel in my district. We know that local property taxes predominantly support our schools. We understand that. And now, not only is our income going to the state to support other districts, which it already does, and we get it, now you're coming after my property. And you're saying, not only do we want your income taxes to support it, we're going to take your property taxes as well. Because what this means is when you take more of my income taxes and send it to other schools, it means that I have no choice but to keep my schools safe and sound and in good condition and operating the best, because we actually achieve in my districts. In order for that to happen, I have to raise property taxes. That's a problem. At what point should we comply with any state statute at all if you only give me $166 per pupil? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Other representatives who wish to speak on this topic? Representative Kifwood.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here and for hosting. I think this is a very important topic. I represent Kendall County, which is one of the highest taxing areas in the state. And right now, as was relayed to Superintendent Sullivan, that I am not in favor of Senate Bill 16 in its current form. I have many individuals that are simply, especially seniors, being taxed out of their homes in Kendall County, and my children attend 308, and I am not in favor of anything that would put more burden on homeowners. I also voted in favor of Senate Bill 1 because we do need to have some sort of pension reform, and I think that cost shift is not the right way to go about with regards to that. I do plan to participate in the hearings. I do appreciate discussions that 308 has engaged in, and they actually presented to State Senator Holmes and Chapellavia alternative suggestions and ideas for consideration with regards to the funding formula. And I think that everybody at the table should be working to provide solutions, ideas, and compromises to fix the problem. We certainly, I'm from the military. I served in the Marine Corps, and we always looked out for the weakest link in an education. We certainly have to make sure that those school districts that are struggling do get support that they need, but not on the backs of school districts that have been working very hard to achieve great results. So I do appreciate the discussion, and I look forward to more discussion. And I do, in its current form, the way, if there are no changes, I am not in favor of it.
Okay, Representative Sanger.
Yes, I just want to make a comment real quick. And, you know, there's no question at all our priority is education, and we want to see education not only funded 100%, but funded at the level it needs to be funded to do the job it needs to do. But the state is under a lot of stress right now, and the pension problem and actually the Medicaid problem still hasn't been solved entirely. To give you a breadth of how big the pension issue is, the federal budget deficit in 13 was $530 billion. Our state unfunded liability for the pension system is $100 billion. It's 1/5 of the federal budget deficit. That's how big this problem is. So wishing it is not going to make it go away, and that's going to continue to put stressors on education. No question at all. It has now, and it's going to continue. We added another 400,000 individuals to the Medicaid rolls, which again is federally funded right now, but that's going to decrease. That's going to continue to put stresses on education. So we've got bigger pictures. We've got a big issue, other issues that we have to look at. No question, everybody in this room understands the importance of education and our kids and the rest. But we've got to work together to make sure some of these other things are taken care of also, so we don't have to do this. Or if we do this again, we're having good news discussions, not the stressor discussions that we are having now.
Thank you. I'm going to be our timekeeper here and note that we are approaching our agreed-upon closing time. I'd like an opportunity now for if there are Board of Education members who have a comment or a question that they'd like our legislators to maybe briefly address. Board Member Fielden.
Thanks. I really appreciate your time, and I also appreciate hearing some of the vigor and so forth back and forth to see some of the dialogue that goes forward. I'd have to say that you know, board members are elected. We don't get paid. We're all volunteers. The state does a fantastic job of pushing down a lot of regulations on us in addition to all our funding issues. So when you talk about taking more money away from us, our natural reaction is going to be to put up our defenses and say, you're cheating us. And that's there's no other way to say that. You can't mandate us on one side and reach into our pocket on the other. And that's basically what we're here to tell you. If you're going to deny state funding, if you're going to deny state funding to the districts who are successful, who can make the grade point averages, who can educate their children, relieve the mandates from us. Don't subscribe us to the state testing. Give us some relief in that regard so we can go on our way and continue with our education process. We also understand as caring members of the community that children need an education, and we don't want to see them denied. But I don't know for sure that it's an issue of money. There has to be a retraining and a rethinking of thought in how education is delivered. I will agree with the statement about prisons and schools. It's a comment I often make. I build schools for a living. That's how I feed my family and support. I'll say to people, you can put your money in two directions. You can put it in high schools or prisons, because that's where it's going to go. The minute the kids graduate from high school, they either need to be employed in gainable jobs, or they're going to do other things to support themselves, and that's really what it comes down to. I think you all have a tough road up ahead of you, as do we. I wish you well, but I also think Springfield needs to hear more directly from Board of Education members in open session, as opposed to in the vacuum.
Thank you. Board members? Board Member Swanson?
Is this on?
It is.
Okay. So first of all, I want to thank you all for being here. And just by a little bit of way of introduction, in addition to being a board member on District 200, I represent DuPage on the Board of Directors of the Illinois Association of School Boards. And one of the good things about that is that you actually get a view of other areas of the state and how what their needs are, what their priorities are, and it's not a homogeneous state. So I just want to let you know my remarks are in that perspective. And I also want to thank you very much for everything that you do. As I was thinking about coming to this meeting this morning, I thought, I would not want to be you, not because of this meeting, but really the problems, as I've been thinking about SB 16, it's a very difficult problem to unravel, this business of equity in education. And I do believe that all school board members everywhere support equity in education. And I think maybe rather than thinking about the purpose of this meeting as being 3 districts who are very alarmed because the potential of SB 16 would be impactful to us, if you could think about a bigger perspective, which is, I think, what's been alluded to by Representative Chapalavia and Representative Sanger and others of you, that tackling the school funding formula, which very much needs to be done, but doing that before you tackle the bigger problem of overall education funding, I said to someone this morning, is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. This particular rearrangement puts all the deck chairs to one side and makes the boat sink faster. So that's why we're a bit alarmed about it. But I really think that the big message is keep your focus on the big picture of overall education funding. What you've said this morning about, the bill not proceeding ahead either at all or as written, reassuring. But just to let you know, part of our concern is, we as a school district have to plan at least a year ahead. But most of us are planning ahead way more than that, 3 years, 5 years. And our constituents expect us to do that. And so we can plan for anything, but we cannot plan for everything. And when we have this level of uncertainty, it is difficult for us. Just as one example, 2 years ago, I think it is, we tried to pass a building referendum for a preschool, much needed in our district. Didn't pass, various reasons, but one reason that was cited over and over again is we don't know where the state of Illinois is going on funding, so we don't know as individual taxpayers whether we can support this additional tax burden. So it's not just even about what we do with our school district budgets, it's also about what our taxpayers and property owners feel they can support, and so it all has a ripple down effect. So I would say certainty is a big issue for us, and that would be very helpful to us to be able to really know what things are. And although this is reassuring, it is confusing. And just one little anecdote, I did have the opportunity to take part in some interviews with candidates for a couple of districts, non-incumbents. All 4 of those candidates, only one of them knew what SB 16 was about, and that one didn't know what the potential impact would be. So in terms of alerting our public to what this is, I think, you know, there is information that the public needs to know and doesn't know, and that is the purpose for our information and communication to our public. So hopefully it can be in that perspective.
Thank you. Just one second here. I did, for the audience, I did forget a logistical point. We are about to come up on the time for public comment, and if you wish to speak to the boards, in the back table by the door is a pink sheet. We'd ask that you'd register and then you'd turn that in. So if you do intend to speak, we'd ask that you'd fill that out, and we'll come to public comment in a second, and we'll go to Board Member Rasek.
Sure, thank you. I think I want to echo what Rosemary just said. You know, again, I thank everyone for being here. I think democracy is best served when we're comfortable being uncomfortable and we engage in conversation and advocacy, and as trustees, it's our responsibility to listen to our constituencies and then filter what we need to filter to best serve our communities. I want to thank everybody again for giving us that opportunity. As a board member in District 204, of course, I'm a trustee and I represent our community. But I want to be absolutely clear to our representatives that this is about all children in the state of Illinois. This is just not about District 203, 200, District 204. We need to adequately fund education in this state. I applaud the first effort to begin conversation, yet we need to become serious about our funding for all our children.
Great, thank you. And again, as the timekeeper here, I apologize if we have other comments, but we are coming on 9 o'clock. We do have 3 members of the community that would like to speak. So if it's okay, I'm going to move to that. Are we okay with that, board members? Okay, thank you. Our first speaker, Laura Swanson, 2366 Legacy Drive in Aurora. Deputy Superintendent Osborne. Oh, I'm sorry. Julie Carlson has a microphone. We're going to ask you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, I'm Laura Swanson, District 204 parent. As you know, our district is facing that $10.1 million reduction from SB 16 and as well as a pension cost shift, which is 9.4, so a total of about approximately $20 million. My kids' education is important, and shame on my district if they did not communicate this information to me. So to have someone say you should or shouldn't be encouraging your district parents to contact local legislators. And I feel that the legislators feel upset over the public reaction due to their decisions. That's something that that is the result of an action that you took when you voted for SB 16 or our sponsor of it. Please don't lose sight of what is important, and that is all the kids of state of Illinois. Reshifting, or I should say redistributing education cost or funding is not the solution. So what I want from SB 16 is to be equitable, to be considered physically responsible, and just because it's got learning disabilities in there, the Association of Learning Disabilities has also is opposed to it. That is the end of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Warren Dixon, 227 Spring Avenue, Naperville.
Thank you. Good morning. Warren Dixon, Naperville Township Assessor. I work with both the school boards and many of our legislators as we travel and we explain property tax bills. And I've grown up with the Chappas. We work well together. One component that's always confusing and left out of this particular discussion, and many individuals don't know it, and maybe many of you do not know it either, is the TIF situation that we deal with in the city of Chicago. The entire loop is a TIF district. Most of the downtown and a large portion of Cook County has multiple TIF districts, which that, as legislators, we know impacts the Chicago public school system and the funding component. So I would like to address that question to the legislators to implore that to be a part of the conversation going forward. We don't receive, the Chicago Public Schools do not receive that property tax revenue from the base at that TIF situation. So it's never talked about, it's never understood. That's pushed out to the suburban collar counties from there. So I ask you to, look into that too.
Thank you. And then final registered speaker, Tom Higgins, 725 North Ellsworth in Naperville.
Just a quick question. It seems to me, listening to this discussion, that there's some conflict about what SB 16 does in terms of the state taking over the employer pension for the Chicago Public Schools. I'd love to get just a simple does it or does it not. Will the bill as written now transfer CPS's responsibility for making the pension payment onto the state, yes or no?
I'd ask if there's a representative that briefly wants to address it. We've heard one speak to it.
It's not combined right now, so the discussion is there on the table, but it's not part of the bill yet. Or in the bill, period. It's not in the bill. There's discussion that happened in the sense of the discussion of how is that going to affect and how the rest of the state would look if Chicago still remains to pay their own portion of the pension. Okay. So the discussion is ongoing. There's a lot of debate on that. So it's not, what we feel is why should it be fair for one area, not for the other. And Senator Tarantino probably has a better aspect of that. So
I will read the statement because that was a question that was asked to me, and I will read the reply just so I have the exact words that I did send one of the local superintendents. Senate Bill 16 accounts for the fact that CPS is the only school district in Illinois that covers its own pension obligations. Senate Bill 16 does not pay for Chicago public school pensions. It does not change the current law that directs the state to pay for pensions obligations for every other school district in the state except for Chicago public schools. Rather, Senate Bill 16 deducts the value of the normal pension cost from the calculations for the district's available local resources and preserves pension contributions for any other district in the state. And again, it eliminates the Chicago block grant, which gives Chicago public schools a set amount of money regardless of need.
Can I just add to that? From our staff analysis, for Chicago only going forward, available local resources will not include any amount paid to the Chicago Teachers Pension Fund for normal pension costs during the preceding fiscal year. What that means, and what Warren was talking about, is when you calculate EAV as a factor that goes into the formula, you have to be very good about what that EAV factor is. I had an hour-and-a-half discussion with our assessor yesterday about the factors that feed the formula, and I asked Senator Manar in public testimony when he brought this bill forward, did you look at the factors that feed into the formula? Did you look how average daily attendance is really accounted for? Did you look what really constitute a poverty student? Did you look at EAV, including the fact that there are hundreds of TIFs in the city of Chicago, and what is EAV really attacking? Because out of 102 counties, Chicago calculates their EAV different from the rest of the 101. And unless you understand these underlying factors and how they feed into it, you're not going to get the right formula anyway. It's still going to be skewed to the benefit of Chicago, and that's exactly what this does. It now says local available resources, which is what you're talking about local property wealth. That is now diminished under this bill because they can't, if you have to pay pension costs against that, and oh, by the way, they took a pension holiday, which was agreed to by the legislator for 3 years, and then they asked for 2 more, but we stopped that. That's very important to know. One other thing about this, currently 40% of our state education funding is equalized for property wealth. Under Senate Bill 16 as it stands now, 83% of state funding is equalized for local wealth. So local wealth matters more in Senate Bill 16 than it did before, and that's why you have to have those factors correct, and EAV has to be a topic of discussion.
Well, looking at the time, I'm going to go ahead and, on behalf of the 3 superintendents and the 3 school districts, a very heartfelt thank you to our legislators for giving us your time and being here today. I think, for one, what I certainly hear that we appreciate, that I know is true at the local level, the passion and respect that you have for education and our kids is, I don't think we could ask for better representation in Springfield than each of you caring for our kids. I look forward to watching and listening to your conversations, and I know the 3 of us and our board stand ready to assist you and inform you in any way that we can to support you. So at this time, this might be a little bit clunky, but I think we're going to need, just to be clear, we'll do 3 separate motions for adjournment for each district. So why don't we start with 200? Is there a motion to adjourn for District 200?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
District 203, a motion for adjournment?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
District 204, a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
All in favor? Thank you, everyone, for your time and being here. I'll remind you.